And hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Album Homework Assignment. It's Sunday morning, at least here in the U.S. What better way to spend some time with us on the channel, as well as you all watching, but a little homework assignment on a Sunday. School should only be Monday to Friday, but here on SOT, we do it a little bit differently. So we've got in the co-captains chairs today, we've got Scott Berry and Eric Porter. What's happening, guys?
Good morning. How are you?
Good, man.
Everybody's doing good here. I'm very curious to see what you guys have given each other and spent some time with over the last couple of weeks. So as far as who goes first, I'm gonna cover the eyes up and I'm gonna run the old magic wand and give a point. And Scott, you are the recipient of going first today.
All right.
What were you given by Mr. Porter?
All right. Well, Eric picked for me an album by Camel, and that's a band I've heard a lot about on the channel, but I've never actually listened to them. And the album is the Snow Goose, or music inspired by the Snow Goose, more specifically.
For legal reasons.
What's that?
For legal reasons.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I found that out in my research, and seems to be a favorite among a lot of the proggers in the group. So I'm like, okay, let's dive in. Let's see what it's all about. And it's an all instrumental album. And what's weird about that is this band normally had vocals and lyrics in their songs. I looked it up, they did. So this was unusual for them. I'm not aware of too many bands that have done that. But
yes, it seems like that's twice this week we've actually talked about this, because I think on In the Prog Seat earlier in the week,
right.
Ken was talking about that Bonko album that's all instrumental. It's like the one weird
really?
in their catalog, right? So yeah, Camel did the same thing here, right around the same time too, which is interesting.
Yes, yeah.
That's cool. Well, it's all instrumental, and there's 16 tracks. Although I would say it's not always clear where. It's not always a clear distinction where one ends and the next one begins. The songs tend to flow together, but it's a concept piece meant to be listened to as a complete body of work, not just individual songs. Although I did see that they released a single from this album, or at least in the UK they did, which I thought was a little strange, but whatever works, And it has I would say, sort of a movie soundtrack sort of feel to it. Stylistically, to my ears, it kind of sounds like a cross between jazz fusion and maybe classical music or orchestral music. So there's no head banging here, but that's okay. I'm all right with that. Instrumentation on here, it's top level. Keyboards and guitar tend to dominate through most of the songs. There's some flute. And they do some things with the synths, to kind of make them sound like classical instruments. Like I could swear I hear some oboe and some violins on some tracks, and I'm pretty sure that's synths. Am I correct on that, Eric?
I think they actually used an orchestra for that.
Yeah.
So you're here. Yeah, you're hearing.
You were hearing it correctly. Yep.
Okay. Well, I tried looking that up, and I couldn't find anything that said that credited those particular instruments. So that's what made me think maybe it was the synths or something. But anyway, it sounds great when they use them. There's parts on here, places on the album where the guitar, I think, has a little bit of a David Gilmour kind of quality to it. It's got that kind of soaring feel to it that he has, that tone, that crying quality.
Scott, it's interesting that you brought that up. It's one of the reasons that attracted me to Camel in the beginning, and I believe, Pete, back me up on this if you know, I think Andy Latimer actually auditioned for Roger Waters' band at one point, and I don't remember if it was when he was sick, because he had been sick, or something else, but I think Waters might have wanted someone who vocally and it wasn't in Latimer's range to sing, but I'll look that up again, but I'm pretty sure he actually auditioned for Waters' band at one point.
It could be. I mean, he would be a perfect fit because he's got that kind of very melodic, emotional soloing style like Gilmour.
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely
makes sense.
Yeah, and it's I've listened to this about maybe 7 or 8 times, and I think I'm liking it a little more with every listen as it becomes a little more familiar to me. And that's a good thing. Song by song, it starts off with the Great Marsh, kind of a gentle fade in, and you hear the sounds of geese in the background, followed by some soft keyboards and some non-lyrical vocals. There are vocals on this album, but there's no words, no lyrics. Kind of choral vocals, I guess I would call them. And it goes into Rayator. Am I saying that right? Rayator.
Close enough, right, or something like that.
Ryadar, I think it's, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Radar. Whimsical, and it's a whimsical, upbeat tune with some beautiful piano, keyboards, and flute. And then toward the end of it, you got a little funky guitar, got the kind of waka chicka kind of thing going on there toward the end of it. I call that shaft guitar. And that goes into Raider Goes to Town. And the tempo kind of picks up, guitar kicks in, the keyboards join in, and about midway through, it kind of slows down a little. And the guitar starts to take on that David Gilmour kind of tone that I was talking about earlier. And it almost sounds like it could be an outtake from Dark Side of the Moon. And then that one is followed by a couple of softer ones. Sanctuary, it's got a short little beautiful acoustic guitar piece. And that's followed by Fritha. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right either. Featured, and that generally features just keyboard, and that's only about a minute as well. And that goes into the Snow Goose, and just some soaring guitar playing on that one. Really like that one a lot. And that goes into Friendship, another shorter one. Features that's where that oboe sound kind of comes in, or what sounds to me like an oboe. And you said it was that they did.
I'm pretty sure
on this album, because as I was doing my research, I saw that they actually did this in concert with the London Symphony Orchestra and released it as a live album, and that one's on my radar now. So
a live record is really good.
It is really
yeah,
yeah.
I can imagine. And then goes in. Where was I? Yeah, Friendship's got the oboe, and it kind of ends with a more synthy kind of sound to it, which goes into Migration, another tempo pickup, and features some more non-lyrical vocals and keyboards, which goes into Rayator Alone, melancholy keyboard-driven tune, and that goes into Flight of the Snow Goose, and that's a great up-tempo track with full band on that one. And as the name implies, it kind of conjures images of birds in flight. And that's followed by Preparation, and that kind of slows things down again. There's a lot of tempo changes here. That's kind of how you know if you're from one song to the next. And it's another keyboard-driven tune, more non-lyrical vocalizing. And this one has a bit more of an ominous feel to it. And that goes into Dunkirk. And Dunkirk is really cool. I really like that one a lot. It starts with a kind of a militaristic kind of feel to it. Evokes images of troops marching into battle. And it builds and it gets more intense, and you hear some French horns kicking in, and at about 3.5 minutes, guitar kicks in and it gets faster and more chaotic. That's the battle, and it ends with the gong, and the gong, I believe, symbolizes that somebody has died. Someone's been killed in battle. That goes into Epitaph, and that title speaks for itself. It's mournful, keyboard driven, and it's got bells tolling intermittently. It leads into Fritha Alone. The entire song is just a mournful, very beautiful song with just piano. And that leads into La Princesse Perdue. That picks up the pace with the violins at the beginning. And it transitions into a more keyboard-driven sound. That soaring guitar kicks in and ends very orchestral and majestic, and has a very uplifting feel to it. And it comes back to the Great Marsh, reprise of the opener, and gently fades out. And sounds great. I really enjoyed this a lot. I expect to be revisiting this one a good bit and hearing new things every time I listen to it. And I think it's a good one to listen to on the drive home from work. I listen to it a lot on my way home from work. And it's also a good one on the headphones. You can hear a lot of different things on the headphones that you might not hear otherwise. And it wouldn't take a lot for me to imagine this being played by a full orchestra. Dunkirk in particular, that one just sort of makes me think of Star Wars for some reason. And so after a couple of listens, well, I lost my place. Anyway, I think it's worth mentioning, some of us think of prog as having a certain sound to it, but it's really more of an approach to making music, how you make the music. The devil's in the details. Camel doesn't sound like Rush. He doesn't sound like Gentle Giant. He doesn't sound like Tall, et cetera, et cetera. All these bands sound different. There's not, maybe yes, in Genesis, there's a little commonality there, but most of these bands I don't think really sound that much the same. It's kind of their approach to music. It's this certain high level of musicianship.
That's why this era was so great, because you did have all these classic bands that were very unique from each other. And that doesn't happen that often these days anymore, right? Camel is very different from all these other bands.
And yeah, they absolutely are. But I'm very interested to hear how they sound with vocals now. So,
check out Mirage.
That was where I was at, Pete. I was thinking Mirage, or I was thinking, obviously I gave Scott the Snow Goose, but Mirage was.
They're two classics, right? I mean, most people pick one or the other. So yeah.
I watched
your. You can watch Pete's ranking.
I was just going to say, I watched Pete's ranking, and those were his top two, Mirage being one and Snow Goose being two.
Yeah.
Still go with that, Pete?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, they're, let me just pull up their discography here. I mean, the first album, Mirage, Snow Goose, and Moon Madness, are probably their best four. But, it depends on what you like, because they went for more of like a poppy style, starting with Rain Dances and Breathless, I Can See Your House From Here, Nude, and The Single Factor. Those are very commercial sounding albums, but they're pleasing to listen to. They're like I said, they're not as proggy, they're more pop based, but you still have Andy Latimer's guitar throughout all of them. But I think the classic stuff is the first four, in my opinion, anyway. But there's
that seems to happen with a lot of bands.
But all their 70s albums are worth hearing. But if you're gonna take a jump into their discography, I would say Camel, Mirage, Snow Goose, Moon Madness, and Rain Dance is probably your best place to start.
Yeah, Rain Dance is really good. That's a good one as well.
Yeah, it is. So I got to ask the question, Scott. So now that you've had a little time with the Snow Goose, would you consider buying this? Would you maybe just listen to it online every now and then, or are you going to forget all about it after today? There you go. It's already happened.
Not only that.
Ooh, all right.
It's not open yet.
There you go. All right. Yeah, be prepared to go down the Camel rabbit hole now.
Snow Goose on its own merit, so I haven't listened.
There you go. Very cool. Yeah, Mirage to me is also a pretty special album. It's a little more aggressive, a little more rock based than the Snow Goose, not quite as orchestral, but a lot of the same qualities are there. A couple of their best tracks are on Mirage, I think, anyway. But you got the two best there, but you're going to want to go exploring a little more, I think, once you do that.
I imagine I will.
Yeah. Really good band. I don't know too many people who don't like Camel. If you've heard Camel, most people really like them. I know a lot of people who just absolutely love them. And they got a big discography, but and there's stuff to love on all of them. And I don't think they've ever released a shitty album. There's some that are better than others, obviously.
Now, are they still together?
Yes, technically yes, although they haven't done anything in It's been a while, right? I mean,
The last album was Not
20
in
years
Awake,
ago.
which was like 2002.
Yeah. So it's been
And
20 years. Yeah.
Yeah,
But they
okay.
did hook up with Peter Jones, and I've seen, I think they played Royal Albert Hall 2015 or 2016 with him, and there's a video out of that, but I'd love to hear another
Then they
studio
must still
album.
have a pretty big following, at least in the UK.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, they don't just sign people to the Royal Albert Hall for nothing.
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. And Andy Latimer's a very, very well-respected musician. He's had some health issues in more recent years. I think that's the reason why they haven't really done much of anything. But yeah, very, very.
Unfortunately, that's happening a lot too. With
Yeah.
artists of a certain age.
All I hear is they're
Group,
getting old.
anyway.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm glad to hear you like that. It's very cool. Yeah, good band. It was a good choice that he gave you there.
I hope Eric likes mine, but we'll find out.
We will find out.
So speaking of, what do you got, Eric?
Well, again, Scott, great to meet you in person. We've been friends on Facebook, and one of the things I wanted to bring up, because I have one point about being embarrassed, and I have another point just about Scott in general. Scott, when he posts, you remind me of Chuck. You kind of have this diverse, you like everything. You're a music fan, and I think
I'd say a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the things I like about seeing your posts is you cover a lot of ground in what you like, and that kind of reminds me of Chuck. Chuck has all these diverse interests.
I've noticed that. Yeah.
So Scott gave me, and if people can, I don't know if anyone remembers this. I got Talking Heads, Remain in Light, and my point to saying I was embarrassed is obviously everybody knows the Talking Heads. And outside of Once in a Lifetime, when Scott suggested this to me, I have another buddy who's kind of in that same vein like you and Chuck, who just kind of listens to everything. And he's been trying to get me to listen to Talking Heads. And when I told him about this assignment, he's like, and correct me if I've got the name wrong, what the album before this is Fear of Music?
Correct.
And when I told him I got Remain in Light, he's like, I've been asking you to listen to Fear of Music for years, and you haven't.
That's a good one too.
He was kind of looking forward to seeing this, and it's embarrassing, I guess, in a way, because I know they're a very artsy band. But I have to be honest, when MTV came out, they played that video a lot. And I think at that point I was into Maiden and Aerosmith, and that was kind of my thing. So the Image thing, seeing that video, it just didn't connect with me. I'm like, they're
Right.
just some weird band, and obviously the song sticks in your head because anyone can say, what is it, Take Me to the River, and there's songs that stay with you. But I have never, outside of what are their popular songs, And She Was, which got played on MTV, I have never listened to a Talking Heads record.
Right.
So, thank you for that, because it kind of opened me up. And as I started listening to this, and I did know about the Blue Fripp connection, but again, nothing that I ever investigated. So as I got into this record, and I think I kind of took the same approach as you did, Scott, I went out and read about it as I was listening to it. And I've listened to it quite a bit because we've had the assignment for a couple of weeks. And I've got to say that those first three songs, I immediately hear what Blue took. And I don't know that I can speak to Fripp so much, but I mean, when you listen to those 80s Crimson records, you can hear what Blue brought to Crimson based on what was going on with Talking Heads.
Like before.
So those first three tracks, I do want to say that, and I'm just checking my notes here. So is it Cross-Eyed and Painless and The Great Curve?
Born Under Punches is the first one.
Yeah.
And right, Born Under the Punches.
And then Cross-Eyed and Painless, Great Curve. Yeah.
But those two, I really got into. I mean, great groove. And I think that's the other thing about this record. From reading about it, it sounded like there was a lot of tension in the band at this time. And again, you kind of had the lead singer syndrome where I think the other members were a little jealous that maybe David Byrne was getting a lot of attention from reading about this. It sounded like Tina Weymouth, the bass player, and Chris Franz went and kind of worked on material on their own.
Right.
I think Jerry Harrison was doing some stuff. But basically, in reading about this, they talk about how, and I guess if you think the album, and I didn't say this kicking off, this album was released in 1980. And the album is really looping before looping. Because when you listen to these songs, they're laying down a basic foundation. That foundation runs through the entire track. And then Byrne, and that's another thing with Blue, when I'm listening to Elephant Talk and things like that, and I hear this, I'm like, boy, he took David Byrne right to Crimson, because
exactly
that vocal style. And
Yes.
Here's something, maybe you can explain it to me. I've got to admit, when I started listening to this, I'm like, I don't know that I really dig David Byrne's voice. And then as I'm listening to it, I'm like, but I like Blue.
Yeah.
So, where is that? Why is that happening? Because I'm like, they're very similar, even in the tone and timbre where they're singing. And the more I listen to this, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of getting it. But those first three songs, and it's not that I'm going to skip Once in a Lifetime, but I think everybody knows that one.
Well, fair enough. Yeah.
But those three songs really hit me. And I think in terms of like the Great Curve, Blue has a couple solos in there that are just, they're fantastic. They're typical Blue, but it's something that you would say, again, he brought that to Crimson and kind of used that same style, and obviously did some different things, but
It's got that very jagged kind of sound to it. Yeah.
absolutely. So in listening, like I said, that those first three tracks really grabbed me. And then Once in a Lifetime, obviously, it's a song that I knew, and if I never had to hear it again, it's still a song that I can conjure up in my head. So to me, that's kind of a trademark of a great song. So it's kind of universal. If you say to somebody Once in a Lifetime, they're gonna ring that. And then
You got Brian Eno's handprint is all over this entire.
that's
Absolutely.
I wanted to make that point because Scott made the point about Camel, and listening to this record, I would listen on headphones, and it's a really great headphones record, because you're hearing, again, like when they put that layer down of, I know they talk about Byrne, and he was doing stream of conscious vocals is what they called it, right? So he was just kind of, you hear Blue do that with Crimson, but as I was listening, I'm like, when I was reading about the loops and they're talking about the African influence on the polyrhythms and things like that they were using, but really those songs, the basic foundations of those songs are the same from start to finish. And then there's different sounds and you hear those sounds maybe every fourth measure, you'll hear a guitar thing. I'm like, okay, and that's repeating. And you'll hear the bass line repeating. And even when they're doing a verse and a chorus, kind of that same music's going on, but then they add little things, which I'm sure probably was an Eno, because he's just a great producer. And it talks about how much they liked working with him, even though it sounds like it was difficult.
That was the third album he produced.
He produced for them.
Yeah,
but it's weird how it kind of
previous two
crosses,
as well,
Scott, because I think like I can hear that Cross-Eyed and Painless, that could be now I wasn't a club guy, but that sounds like it would be a dance club tune. I mean,
it certainly could be.
I don't mean that in a bad way. It's kind of electronica, but it's really upbeat and
it's definitely danceable.
A lot going on. And then side two, it's kind of a different, even though it's done the same, it's kind of a different feel. It's almost like each song kind of progressively slows down a bit, and they get
a little more understated. Yeah,
a little darker, a little moodier, not as upbeat. And then the closer, I think the Overload, that was one of the ones where it's almost like a dirge. That one's really just slow and very atmospheric. So I I liked the first side better as it kind of went into the second side. I actually like pretty much everything, but that final song drags for me a little bit.
I got you.
And the only thing that I would say is, and I think this could be a bias because I was reading about it, as I was listening to everything, I'm like, I would have liked a little more, and there is a lot going on, little bits and pieces. I do think some of the songs, maybe because of that looping, maybe are a bit too long, where that repetition kind of gets to you after a while. But overall, I mean, between the sound of the production, like I said, I love that first side, and I do like the second side. It's almost like a yin and yang.
I'd say the second side is a little more of a grower.
Yeah.
You come back a year from now, you might have a different opinion on it.
It's much moodier, much more atmospheric, whereas the first side is really upbeat. But I think what I was impressed about the most was having discounted this band, and really that was my bias based on the video and where I was at that time, just never having pursued them. I really was impressed because I think from a sonic perspective, for 1980, it's a tremendous record. And then reading about the influences, which I don't know if I would have picked up on without reading about it, but they're talking about the African rhythms, how Byrne was being influenced by rap that they were hearing. And for me, 1980, I think maybe I might have heard what was it, Curtis Blow or somebody, one of those early guys. But
right, there wasn't a whole lot of rap to speak.
I didn't know what rap was, but apparently, maybe being in the city and coming out of the city. And if you think about the looping aspect, they were looping before it was looping because they were doing it as a band. They weren't doing
it was very groundbreaking in that regard.
Yeah, where you record, we're going to record 30 seconds and then we're just going to copy and paste for the next 5 minutes. I mean, they were doing that. Yeah. So, and then I did read that Blue and Jerry Harrison are going to be playing Rozfest, and I think they're touring together. So are they doing this album?
Oh, wow.
Or, I think
I'm gonna have to look that up. That's the first I'm hearing of it.
I think they're playing Rozfest this year, and I think it's something, whether it's 40th anniversary that had to be put off because of COVID, but it sounds like they're doing something with kind of reviving this record for the live show.
Wow.
So obviously Blue,
that's pretty cool.
Loved playing with these guys because he's still getting together with them. And I read about him. And Fripp, I think, played on the previous record, right? He wasn't on this, but he played on that Fear of Music.
Yes, he did.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, it's definitely something new and different for me, but I like that it took me out of my comfort zone. And I think what you said, the same thing, it was a grower. The more I listened to it, it really started to sink in, but I really enjoyed the headphones aspect of it because there's so much going on in the production.
Just layers of stuff.
Yeah, really good stuff.
Remain in Light was released October 8th, 1980. Discipline by King Crimson was released September 22nd, 1981. So almost a year later.
There you go.
So there's a little bit of a question. Okay, who's influencing who here? I mean, obviously, you listen to Discipline, and it. I think this album is all over. Not that they're copying it, but
no,
the influence is definitely there. Right? And
yeah, from what I heard, Scott, to me, I mean, I got to say that Blue took a lot from Byrne's, obviously, vocal style, but I think he took a lot from the band, what they did on this record.
Yeah, the arrangement.
Obviously, and brought it to Crimson, because obviously Discipline, much shorter. Well, most of them are shorter songs, kind of in this vein, 4 or 5 minute tracks. The only thing I would say maybe is Crimson, the music might be a little more complex, but it's bringing in all these elements that are on this record. And because Discipline is a complete, right? It's a complete 180 from what King Crimson was.
But that's exactly right.
So
King Crimson is like several different bands. I mean, it's not even just one band to me. a
Yep.
lot of ways. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but each iteration sounds different. I mean, there's a little bit of a common thread. You got Fripp in every one of them, but
Yeah, I mean, the Discipline band,
Yeah.
you've got obviously Fripp and Bruford, who are holdovers from the Red era, but then you've got Tony Levin, who had been with Peter Gabriel for a few years. And there's even some of that influence in that era of King Crimson as well. So you've got the Talking Heads and the Gabriel, the world music and whatever you want to call it, what Gabriel was doing at the time. And then you've got the Talking Heads and what they were doing coming into this band. That's why the Discipline era sounds completely unlike anything that came before it, but you can hear other outside influences that are coming into the band at the time to help.
Well, plus it had been about 7-8 years since their previous album had come out.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Let's been together. So
yeah. Red
obviously
was 74.
there's got to be changes.
34, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on this one, Pete? How familiar are you with?
Yeah, I'm a little curious.
I've never owned any Talking Heads albums. I have like a collection, which has.
I knew they weren't one of your favorites.
No, I mean, I can listen to them. I'm not a huge
Yeah.
fan.
Yeah, I remember you and Martin Popoff talking about them, and you mentioned you had the collection, and
Yeah,
just didn't-
which I mean, they're one of those bands that I always heard on the radio, always saw on MTV, and I was always like, all right, never disliked them, never was crazy about them, and then I don't know, a few years ago, I said, you know what, it'd be nice to have something by them, so I went and got like a pretty jacked collection, which has a lot of stuff, and I can't say I listen to it all that much, but every now and then. I don't mind hearing them. I don't dislike them. They're not really my cup of tea, but
I hear you.
I appreciate them.
Well, I would say if you're gonna just try one of their studio albums, this is the one to try. This is the one I think you would most likely gravitate to.
Yeah, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna listen to the whole thing after we.
Yeah, just
hear.
I mean, give it a shot. You may not dig it. I don't know. I mean, maybe David Byrne is not. Maybe it's the Byrne thing. I don't know, but
I said that, Scott, and
yeah.
And that's kind of what caught me, because when I listened to this, my first couple listens, I was like, I don't know, I'm just not digging his voice. And then I'm like, but Blue sounds pretty close. And I'm like,
well, yeah.
So there's
I don't know if I mentioned to you.
Yeah.
I don't know if I mentioned to you, but I'm a fairly new King Crimson convert. And I just bought and heard Discipline for the first time about a year ago. And that was the first thing I was like, when I heard this, it's like, holy shit, this sounds like Remain in Light.
Yeah. That's a definite, there's no doubt about it. And I got to think that Blue really took that, and because that even the lyric style, the way he sang, it's all David Byrne, at least on those records, Neil Jack and Me, that kind of, going to beat, that whole era. And I think he carried that on. I mean, I think he still did that pretty much through Crimson's catalog. So
yep.
A lot
even on his solo stuff, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, with certainly the vocal style.
Yeah, big time. So Eric, the question is, would you consider maybe buying this? Would this be listened to online from time to time, or would you just walk away, forget all about it?
Well, I won't forget it. I've been streaming it, and between having multiple listens to this and my buddy Paul saying, you got to hear Fear of Music, I will definitely continue to check it out online. I kind of what Scott said about Camel sums this up for me. I did not expect to like this. First couple listens, I was kind of like, and I'm more intrigued the more I listen to it. So I pretty sure I will buy this and probably buy Fear of Music just to get those two, because kind of what you said about Camel, Scott, everything I've read, those seem to be this I think everyone considers their best work, but Fear of Music is right up there. So
yeah, I would say you're going for the top two there, at least in my opinion. I mean, I think they have other good stuff too, but I don't know, Little Creatures and Onward, they got more pop oriented, and it was they're not
Little
bad.
Creatures that was their big hit, right? I mean, that was their big seller.
What was that?
Little Creatures, I think that's their big seller, right?
Yeah, they still play a lot of songs from that one on the radio. I rarely hear anything from this except Once in a Lifetime.
Once in a Lifetime.
Yeah.
So I'll say
There's so much more to it than that.
maybe streaming with the intent to buy. How's that?
There you go.
I'm sure I'll get there though. I really, and that whole connection, I do have to say for 1980, and I know there's a lot of great, we were talking about Ken Scott last night on Proxy. There's a lot of great production that was done in the 70s, but this really sounds, it does not sound dated to me in the least. The production is fantastic. It's a great listen. And I'd say even if it's not your thing, just sonically, it's very interesting to listen to.
Cool. Well, we got two positives here today, so
Cool.
good job. Two albums, neither one was really exposed to before, or bands in general, so that's a good thing. So I want to thank both Scott and Eric for doing their homework and really putting some thought into what they were going to say today. It's always appreciated. So thanks for watching, everybody. If you are familiar with either of these albums, please put your thoughts down in the comments below. And if, like both of them, you have never listened to either one, well, go check them out. Come back and let us know what you think. And stay tuned for another episode of Album Homework Assignment coming up next week. I think next week is Simon Bray and Louis Nasser. But
Oh, that ought to be interesting.
yeah. So I'm pretty sure that's who we have coming next week. I have to talk to both of them this week, but so stay tuned for that and a lot more. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. Stay tuned. What do we got coming up tomorrow morning? Of course, is another episode of albums that are 30 years old in 2022 as we look back on the year 1992. We've got Hudson Valley Squares tomorrow night, Tuesday in the Prog Seat, Wednesday new album review day, Thursday the Monsters Den, Friday morning the Fun House, Saturday the UK Connection, and then we're back right here once again with Album Homework Assignment next Sunday. So for Scott Berry and Eric Porter, I am Pete Pardo. Have a good rest of the weekend, everybody. See you real soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.